Hi everybody, I'm Zac Collins with Scorpion Racing Products, and today we're going to show you how to adjust valve lash on mechanical and solid lifter camshafts. In order to properly adjust your valve lash, you're going to need a couple tools. First thing you're going to need is a 7/32 Allen wrench. It really helps if it has a T-handle on it. You're going to need a set of feeler gauges, and you're also going to need a 5/8 box end wrench. To get started, you're going to go ahead and look at the position of the push rods in the engine, and you're going to go ahead and roll the engine over and rotate it in the normal direction of rotation by hand, depending on which cylinder you're adjusting, whether it's an intake or an exhaust. In this case, we're adjusting an intake, so we have to watch where the exhaust is. So what we're going to do is rotate the engine over and keep our fingers on the push rods to keep them engaged in the lifter cups, and we're just going to rotate the engine over slowly until we start to see the exhaust push rod come up, which it is right now. So we know that right now the intake valve should be closed and it would be on the base circle of the camshaft. So what we can do from this position is go ahead and slide our rocker over the stud, making sure that the curved side is down and the flat side is up. We're going to slide that right over the stud, make sure that the push rod engages with the push rod seat. We're going to go ahead and take our poly lock assembly and just screw that onto the stud by hand. And we're going to screw it down until it's finger tight, but we're going to wind up loosening it up a little bit. So it's finger tight, and as you can see, the rocker has a little bit of play, but not very much. So now that we have our poly lock on, finger tight, we're going to go ahead and grab our 7/32 Allen wrench, our 5/8 box end wrench, and our feeler gauge set. We're going to go ahead and set the 5/8 box end wrench right on the poly lock hex. We're going to put the 7/32 Allen wrench right into the set screw in the middle of the poly lock assembly, and we're going to take our feeler gauge. And depending on the setting of the feeler gauge, you have to look at your manufacturer's cam card for what they recommend the lash settings to. It's based on your cam lobe profile. If you're setting the lash cold, like we are, you're going to want to go ahead and add 4 to 6 thousandths to that setting to compensate for the temperature difference. So in this example, we're setting it to 20 thousandths. So we're going to go ahead and try to set our feeler, let our feeler gauge ride in there, underneath the roller, in between the roller tip and the valve tip. And we're going to slowly back off the poly lock until we can get that feeler gauge to slide in between the two. Once we can get that feeler gauge to slide in between the two, we know that we're roughly right where we need to be, and just go a little bit tighter until you feel drag and resistance on the feeler gauge, and you should actually be able to see the roller turning because of the amount of resistance that you have on the feeler gauge. So we're right there at about 20 thousandths right now. You can leave the feeler gauge in between the roller and the valve if you want, or you can pull it out as long as you keep the wrench where it is, so that way you don't adjust the lash. I like to leave it in just so that I know it's not going to move. Hold the box end wrench in place and go ahead and tighten down the set screw. You're going to tighten the set screw and lock it in place, and then once it's locked in place, you're going to go ahead and remove your feeler gauge, and then you're going to bump your wrench just a hair until it's there. And then you're going to go ahead and remove the box end wrench and the Allen wrench, and you're going to double check your lash right here and make sure that your feeler gauge goes in with some resistance. Take a feeler gauge that's about 1 to 2 thousandths larger and verify it doesn't go in, and then you know that your lash is set properly, and that will not go in. So that's how you set lash on a mechanical and solid lifter camshaft. Now if we were adjusting the exhaust side, we would simply roll the engine over until the intake fully opens and then begins to close and is about halfway closed. So in order to get to that correct position for the exhaust to be on the base circle, we're watching the intake rocker arm open, and now it's going to start to close, and it's about halfway closed. So that's exactly where we need to do the same thing with our exhaust rocker assembly. And that's how we adjust lash. All of our rocker arms are available at performance retailers and distributors nationwide. And you can find more information at www.scorpionracingproducts.com. Please check out scorpionracingproducts.com.